We're all aware of how much anticipation was surrounded around the game Cyberpunk 2077. It was originally announced in 2012 by CD Projekt Red, the studio behind the game, and they described the game as a gripping, free-flowing saga that would immerse players in a sci-fi-like universe. Now, who cares? What's so special about that? Well, if you don't know, CD Projekt Red has a pretty good history of some open-world aspect games and a well-respected studio in the gaming industry, developing the hit series The Witcher, which is highly acclaimed as to having one of the most popular games ever, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. And the Witcher series alone has surpassed 50 million copies sold, which is a pretty elite club in the world of video games, with only a handful of franchises ever seeing that type of success. Now, this video is not about Witcher, and to be completely honest, I wasn't even a big fan of The Witcher 3, but I still respect the game, the way it innovates its own genre, and how immersive the game is. And when I look at Witcher, I see how much CD Projekt Red cares about their games, and how much love is put into them, which is why a game like Cyberpunk had so much hype built around it. And of all the hype Cyberpunk had around it, it 100% resulted in a rushed game. And it was first announced in 2012, like I said, but the developers did say they weren't going to focus on Cyberpunk until Witcher 3 was released, which happened in May of 2015. And we didn't even get any official gameplay trailers of Cyberpunk until August of 2018. The hype doesn't even stop there. In 2019, during E3, we all remember Keanu Reeves coming on stage and reminding us of how breathtaking he is. No. I do want to say that this video is not going to be talking about how blatantly glitchy the game was on release and how CD Projekt Red was filled with all these lies and a rushed product and all that. I don't want to say that. We've already seen that. I 100% think it was a rushed product, but I still think that hundreds of passionate game developers spent countless amounts of hours trying to make the game as good as it could be with the rushed deadline. Sadly, they just cut out a lot from the initial game trailer and had a lot of bugs. But I want to look at the game today for my own playthrough and my own experience. If you do want to see a video about the game when it first released, a YouTuber named BEATEMUPS made a fantastic video about the game. Their link is in the description and I highly recommend them. Going into the game, I didn't have high expectations as I'm not the biggest fan of open world RPG story-driven games. I personally haven't played one in a while, but something about Cyberpunk caught my eye. Maybe it was all the initial hype for the game that made it stand out to me. I truly think it had potential to be one of the best games ever made. In the end though, I spent almost 50 hours on the game in my one playthrough. I have a history of zooming through single player games, and I felt if I did that with this game, I'd miss out on everything the game truly had to offer. And let's just get the elephant in the room out of the way now. Yes, there's bugs. A lot of them. Throughout the game, I encountered so many bugs and glitches, but the most positive note is that none of them were really game-breaking bugs that required me to restart the game, except maybe the one time my loading screen got stuck or I got spawned on a grenade every time, but that was just maybe unlucky save points. Now listen, I know I'm probably a goddamn criminal for defending a large amount of bugs in a AAA game. Lock me up. But I do believe the developers are hard at work trying to fix them, and with a giant game like Cyberpunk, it will take some time. Just look at their patch notes page online and you can see the amount of bugs that have been removed. There hasn't been a patch in a while, but there are rumors that they're working towards a next-gen patch for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and there's also rumors of free DLC coming in 2022. So that's something to look forward to. Although, now back to bugs. I can't recall every single bug that I went through, but here's some clips of my favorite bugs. And then we just got, if you want to avoid spoilers, mute right now. What the f was that? That car just came out of nowhere. What the?
Nice ride. Lots of space. Practical.
Say no more.
What the f?
Please.
You just blew my car up.
Paid me yet.
I know. Here.
May this blade serve you well.
Whose voice was that? Whose voice was that? What the fuck was that? The heart surgeon didn't sound like that. Dennis most certainly did not sound like that. Who the fuck was that? Here, may this blade serve you well. All right, bugs. That's a negative of the game. Now, how about something positive? Overall, two big positives for me in this game were the characters you're interacted with, and I'm not talking about random NPCs, we'll get to that in a second, and the overall story of the game. Those stood out to me in a little bit. And I will say, I'm going to do my best to avoid any spoilers of the game, and now let's just get into it. The story is relatively short, and if you mainly focus on just the main story, you can probably beat the game in about 15 hours. But then you end up with a not so good ending, and that's where some incredible story writing comes in. Cyberpunk has multiple endings, and depending on which missions you have done for certain characters, it unlocks the accessibility of those endings. If you end up romancing Pan Am, or just finishing her quest line, I'm pretty sure, you can access an ending with her. But outside of that, there's only 3 other endings, and you can also get another secret ending by just clicking on certain dialogue options with Johnny Silverhand, aka Keanu Reeves. Now, outside of Pan Am, there's a few other characters you can romance, and I view them as main characters, as they have a handful of missions you can do with them, and depending on how those missions go, can determine your relationship with them and how their character ends up at the end of the game. Now, outside of those main characters that you can romance, there's still a small handful of characters who call you to do side quests and gigs, and all those characters also have deep backstories and interesting quest lines like the Prowl family. Of course, the story of the game and all these characters have been the same since release day, so really, is the story enjoyable today on all platforms? I can only speak from a PC experience, but I had so much fun with it. I found myself trying to dive into as many side quests and gigs as I could. And even after doing all those, I still had so many things I could do in Night City, like buy a bunch of cars or even do police missions. Now, the police missions aren't like becoming a cop or anything like that. You just do small little side quests involving the police. There's a lot of content in this game, and over the past year, CD Projekt Red clearly has been hard at work. You saw the patch notes. I can't read all that. That's way too much. How dare you assume I know how to read? But what I can tell from the patch notes is they're trying to make the game have the best experience possible on all platforms. But even with all those patch notes and fixes, let me tell you, there's still so many bugs and so many small little annoyances that made the game so much less enjoyable. I showed some funny bugs and glitches, but here are a few things that were just straight up not fun. Here's number 1 thing that was not fun. The cops. Just like the real world, they're bullshit in this game. Now, if you accidentally commit a crime, you'll get a warrant out for your arrest. And the warrant is really easy to escape, but sometimes the cops will just spawn right in front of you. When I mean spawn, they just appear out of nowhere and then they start shooting at you. On top of that, the cops are also pretty dumb, which can lead us into the next topic, which is the enemies in the game. The enemies in this game are also just freaking dumb. Throughout the entire game, I never really had any problems with dying a lot. Most of my deaths came at my own hands on accident. But the enemies just seem to forget about you if you just leave their line of sight, or they don't even see you shooting their allies 2 feet away from them with a sniper rifle. I mean, come on. If I'm having a conversation with someone, which is unlikely, and then they just randomly die, I'd have a feeling something's going down. I can compare the enemies in Cyberpunk to the enemies in Deathloop. If you ever played that game, you know that those enemies are also freaking dumb. And they don't present a challenge whatsoever. I will say on the more positive side of things, like the 2 boss fights that I had, that's another negative. I didn't see any boss fights. The boss fights weren't too bad. I did have some challenges with like a final boss. I'm not gonna spoil it, but the final boss was kind of a challenge. That's good. All right, enough about the enemies. The third thing that I really did not enjoy in this game was the NPCs as a whole. They're not enemies, but they might as well be. Clearly, I don't like any of the characters outside of the people CD Projekt Red spent actual time on. You see the same NPC models everywhere, and they're just walking down the street doing literally nothing. Seems like they're just programmed to walk down the street and react if you do anything near them. 98% of the NPCs say the same thing, and they're just there to fill in the space to make the world seem less empty. And speaking of an empty world, that's where we get one more thing I do not like, and it's the vehicles and the driving. Wait, how does that relate to an empty world? I don't know, just think of a cool transition. Now, when I started playing the game, a lot of people suggested I use a mod to make the driving more bearable. But I didn't want to use mods as I needed to experience the game the way everyone else will, which is mod-free. To my knowledge, console users don't have the ability to mod games like that. Those poor fellas can't mod the game to make sweet love to Keanu Reeves. The driving just was not responsive and it didn't feel good. I will say the driving motorcycles felt much better compared to an actual car, but it wasn't that much better still. There's a lot of cars you can buy in the game, but they also give you a lot of free cars from dead characters or completed storylines. Like at the end of Pan Am's storyline, you get a free car in a cave, and apparently it's the best car in the game. But of course, my game was bugged and the car never appeared. That's nice. Okay, enough about cars. So the game has a few more negative things than just bugs, in my opinion. Please also remember this is my opinion. I just shared and not everyone may agree with it, and that's okay. I found my 50-hour playthrough of Cyberpunk to be more enjoyable than I anticipated. Yeah, it had bugs. Yeah, it had flaws, but so does your dog and you love them. But in the end, it was still a great game with great main characters and a pretty enjoyable storyline. CD Projekt Red had potential to make one of the greatest games of all time. Sadly, it seems like the higher-ups rushed the product and it left a bad taste in everyone's mouth, and it certainly made a lot of people hesitant to try the game. Yes, it was the biggest flop in 2020 and maybe the biggest flop for a launch in video game history. It may have even lost them $51 million because of refunds. The game sold 13.7 million copies with over half of them on PC. And if they continue with the somewhat consistent updates and the free bug patches and the DLCs, then I'm hoping it can turn into a success story, just slowly. The game is expected to get major updates for the next-gen consoles and even a DLC, like I said, which will help turn Cyberpunk from a catastrophic launch to a beautiful success story, just like No Man's Sky. I'm glad I played it, and I'm glad I bought it during the Steam Winter Sale. The game goes on sale so much, it was definitely worth it at 50% off, and hope this video helped you decide if the game was worth it in your eyes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh yeah, and sub if you want to. It's free. Only if you enjoy the videos. I don't know. See you next time. Bye. Thanks for watching.